And good morning, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. We appreciate your being here each and every day. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember you can go find out more about what we do on officehours.global. That's kind of the central organizing website. I'm Bill Davis. I'm sitting in for Alex this morning, who had other things that were critical that he had to get to today. Our first hour, as always, is usually on general discussion, production-related questions. It still will be today, but our second hour, we typically dive into a deeper topic. But today is going to be unusual in that because Alex was hosting that second hour. We're going to do 2 hours of Q&A. So this is an excellent day. Should you want to get your questions answered on the show, we will have a full 2 hours of Q&A. And we're going to dive over to Mitch now, who's going to start us off on our first question. Mitch, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning. And our first question from Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California. Zoom Apps SDK has now been released to the public. This new developer program allows you to deploy web apps right inside of Zoom and interact with client features. Who do I need to encourage to build a Zoom app in our industry vertical?
That's very exciting news since this entire show is based on Zoom. Guy Cochran wants to get onto this first. Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say Jonas Dottel. I mean, he's here all the time, and he's a developer. He made PlayOutB, and he's pretty in tune with the behind-the-scenes Zoom, and I think we've been fighting for some of the things like isolated audio and maybe even a deeper color space at some point in time. I know that we have I think it's around a 4 to 6 megabyte size limit right now for each participant's video, so I'd love to see that cranked up. Maybe one day we'll see richer colors. It always surprises me after looking at Zoom so much and then go look at like a well-shot video in the edit suite where it's like, wow, that's super sharp, that's super colorful. So hopefully we'll see some of those things creep up here by the end of summer.
Is the Zoom software development kit something that somebody can use to build an application that they can put into some sort of merchant store and make part of their living off of these things? Is that what the software development kit allows?
Yeah, it gives you the hooks to be able to use it. Well, now I think the big deal is that you can do it in a web browser, so you can actually create products that you can put inside of their app store, if you will. So in the back end, you can peruse through all those, and then you can either purchase. There are some that are monthly, but most of them are free.
Wow, with the number of people who are involved in Zoom around the world every day, I can't see that as being anything other than a boon for anybody who wants to learn that. John Preto has some thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sure Jonas is working on it right now. Fenwick framer built in, meters built in, all the stuff that we use for the studio version. But Andy, I'm still waiting for the release of ISO to come out this month too.
Oh, okay. Mitchell Hill wants to weigh in on this.
I guess the intention here is that the closer your code can get to the actual Zoom coding, that it's going to be more efficient, more fast, more deeper in far as you can reach down into that low level code. So I guess we can look forward to functionality that we didn't have before, maybe faster, maybe better, that kind of stuff. That's me speculating.
Well, and speculation is that's part of our purview here. We constantly speculate about things, and it's good to know the industry trends, where they're going. And Zoom touches so many lives now that it can't be anything other than a good thing to have more, to allow people who are interested in learning how to do it to control this, to have more control over it. And boy, if there's a marketplace there and more people get involved and can make part of their living off this, all the better for the features for those of us who like to use this software every day.
I heard a rumor, Bill, that MixFX may be the next acquisition for Zoom, but it's just a rumor. So I thought I'd pass that on.
Well, there we go. We're turning out that Office Hours turns out to be an incubator for talent.
They already hired Adam, but now they're going to acquire MixFX too?
I don't know that for sure. Just kind of getting that feeling.
That was a slip, Mitchell.
It's just interesting that so many of these tools were here for us at Office Hours in the beginning and have really accelerated as we have accelerated this show. And it's been fascinating to be a part of and kind of be behind the scenes a little bit and being able to see some of these things as they were coming out. Lois has something she wants to weigh in on this. Lois?
Well, all this wonderful stuff that's happening, all the innovations and everything, how in the world are normal users supposed to keep up with what's out there? Where is the training?
Well, that's actually a good question. Although in the case of software development kits, I think part of the goal of an app builder who's going to take this kit and do something is to do a user interface that makes those things somewhat obvious. I mean, they always say good UI, user interface design, is pretty intuitive. So hopefully, if many developers get into this and start making these new applications that work inside of Zoom, they'll be easy enough to use. Fingers crossed. Kenneth Jonas wants to check on this too.
I think one of the interesting things about this is that the release of the software development kit tends to tell me anyway that the original developers have now brought this to a level of professionalism that they are satisfied with it. And they have said, so this is the way we want it to be. Now you guys go play with it and make it the way you want it to be. And we won't have to chase each other too much anymore into the future.
That is interesting. I know in all of my reading and going through things, that people talk about software as a platform, that it's one thing to develop it inside your shop. It is another thing to put those hooks in so people outside your shop can affect it and still keep it a stable and robust program for others. So it seems like all good. That's where it seems like it's going for me. Guy, you had another comment before we move on?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a Zoom app, but I was digging into Andrew Cross's new position at Grass Valley. They have something called Live Video Producer. And in an article, I'll put a link to it in the chat. There was talk of Zoom integration and Teams integration. So something for Andy to go prod. If he's asking for a person, go prod Andrew Cross and give him what Cinemaker had, which is that raw SDK, being able to pull that video right into an editing app. So I'd love to have Grass Valley Live Producer in the cloud with a higher megabit contribution feed. So there you go. Go talk to Andrew Cross.
Ooh,
Father of
interesting.
NDI. Thanks.
John Pretto wants to be in on this too before we finish up. Go ahead.
Yeah,
John.
but when he was still at NewTek, they made all those claims with the TC2 too, and I never saw that come to fruition. Maybe over at GV it might happen, right?
Yeah, we need to see the tighter integration so it's actually native like how Cinemaker is, because the TriCaster one is kind of a weak implementation. I want to see, now that he's over there, Grass Valley is one of the biggest in our industry. So if anybody can pull it off, it's these guys. So something to look forward to the future.
They clearly have the resources necessary to do what they want. I will just note that in the middle of my career, the idea of vaporware, which is things that were announced and ballyhooed, then never came to market, seemed like it was a much bigger problem than it is now. But boy, with a number of people, I mean, you've got not just the computers on people's desks, but now phones in every pocket out there, the number of potential customers for somebody, that whole landscape has just changed now. So for whomever cracks this and manages to get the first really brilliant Zoom app, good luck to you. Let's move on to the next question. We've had some time here.
Next question for John Clark in London, England. A new Keynote update came out today. What does the panel think of the dynamic backgrounds or the new control features in the update?
Guy's going to start us off. Guy, what is this dynamic background thing all about?
Well, it's kind of funny because I saw that question pop up shortly before the top of the hour here, and I went to update my laptop, which is an older MacBook with an i9 in it, and there was no update. So I walked upstairs here, and what do you know? It's on the M1. So here's what it looks like. Here's an existing slideshow, and I'm just going to modify the theme. And now you have this dynamic. So here's 3 of the templates. There's like a lighter cloud-looking one. There's a dark, dynamic dark, and then here's rainbow. So if we say choose, and then if we go ahead and hit play, you'll notice that it kind of has this gradient that's swirling around. So I'll let it play out just a little bit so you can see. It looks like Dennis might have something too that might be cooler than mine, but this is just a slideshow that I was getting ready to prepare for today for just a team update at DVE. And so you'll see in this one, the gradient is now swapping across the top. And again, all I did was modify an existing presentation and change the theme. But yeah, there's a nice picture of David
That's
Brady.
cool.
It's all about building David relationships. Brady. So you go to trade shows, not just to see stuff. You go to build relationships. So yeah,
that's awesome. Could you quickly look and see if the flying toasters background is in there? I must have that.
I didn't see that one there.
Oh no!
Yeah, it's just
I'm so disappointed.
It's just these ones. So and then the other one, the dynamic Actually, I didn't try this one. Let me try. If you guys want to see what it looks like in real time, so we'll hit play. Let's go back to the very beginning. That's super subtle. If you guys can see it.
Yeah, but that's nice, and it adds just a little bit of motion.
Yeah, before a presentation starts, to have that, rolling around on the big projection screen, this would add an air of calm.
I wonder if people use this for backgrounds for Zoom and things like that. I kind of can see the utility of having a slightly moving background, because you won't mistake something there for someone's frozen. Because with those slides, I've known when people have left them up a little bit too long, and that's one of the challenges of doing Zoom presentations online. You go, are they still there? Or, we're kind of training ourselves, and hopefully the standard is to keep yourself on the screen so they have a human to look at more than just a static background. But maybe that'll help a little bit. John Pretto has some thoughts on this.
The gentleman from Washington did a fine job. He beat me to the punch. And Mitchell, I hope you noticed those moving backgrounds were light and airy and not dark and gloomy like ours are.
Dennis also has a banana up of some sort. I wonder what that is. That's interesting.
Let's see the banana.
Well, it's a lovely banana, but it's not moving, and neither is its background. Or is it?
Looks like he's using the Unreal Reality engine from Hitchhiker's Guide.
Nice. Oh, yeah, it is moving very subtly. Well, I like
and
that.
If you come back to that image in a couple of days, you'll begin to see some black spots growing on the side of the banana there.
Updating content as it ages. That's good. Here's our fresh fruit status today. Do you want to buy into this? Lois Richter has a thought on this.
Yeah, I think that the backgrounds are great, but there again, you're going to have to figure out what sort of ambiance do you want your audience to have. So with guys really, amorphous, floaty, cloudy thingy versus Dennis's shocking colors. Yeah. Now you have more decisions you have to make, you poor thing.
And I think it's interesting that they give you a set of templates, not just gave you complete free reign on there. That's kind of an Apple-ish kind of thing, but maybe they're trying to send out a signal that, like with font use in the early days of everybody getting desktop publishing, subtlety is a good thing. Not necessarily, you don't have to use every font just because you have 100 new ones this week. So we'll see. But anyway, congratulations for Keynote. A lot of people use it, and it's continuing to progress. Let's move on to the next question.
Oh, sorry. I got to put the banana away that I was virtually sent from Keynote. Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada. Between the ATEM Mini Extreme and Extreme ISO, is the only difference being able to record all inputs? I mean, is the CPU in it the same? I don't need to ISO recording, but if there's more CPU power, I might go for it.
I took a little look at this and tried to track down on the Blackmagic site and other places whether or not that CPU and any other throughput or operating system stuff were different. And in all the Blackmagic stuff I read, I just couldn't tell where they'd done anything. Mitchell, do you know anything about that?
No, if you run if you plug the hard drive into the USB-C port on those ISO decks, it doesn't even go to your computer. It goes to the direct. It's all done inside of the ATEM. So
yeah, I'm wondering if he just means it can. I only have the original ATEM Mini here, and it's never failed me, but I realize that it doesn't have the power of some of the big ones, which have much more switching capacity in there. So I don't know what the memory thing is there. Hopefully somebody else will pop into the chat or into the regular Q&A that we hold every day and know more about how these things are configured down there. But I think for us, not happening. So let's unfortunately move on to the next one.
Talalak Miguel Lopez Waterman from The Road. Apparently he is driving today. I've got some gigs where I have to wear a hard hat. One coming up, in fact. What kind do you like? Comfort fit? I dare say style?
Let's start with Lois Richter and move on to Kenneth Jones after that. Lois, you're up first.
Well, I always thought fitting in was a good idea, so I would probably find out what they're wearing and just get one of theirs. Maybe put a little sticker on the front or something. I used to have to wear a hard hat when we were fighting forest fires, and, you take government issue.
Probably that's OSHA approved, if that's a thing. Kenneth Jones will tell us because he's got one.
Well, everyone should have one. Now, this is not specifically a hard hat. A hard hat is made of metal and will protect you from falling objects. This is a bump hat, and what that means is it keeps you from cutting your scalp on something that you bumped into by mistake, and it also forms a way to identify if you put some logo on the side of it. The color of the helmet also generally means something. White hats are for safety officers and so forth. This one is made by ERB Industries in California, and seems to be a quite nice one to do and easy to wear, and has an adjustable tensioning strap on the back of it that can be arranged to fit even the largest of heads, and it's not terribly expensive.
Thank you, Kenneth. If I ever have to explore a cave of stalactite knives, I'm going to get me one of those because
there you
fabulous. Go. Right. Mitchell Hill wanted to pop in.
I'm just going to say a good hard hat or safety hat actually lifts it slightly off your head so that if you do get an impact, it's not going to be mechanically connected to your brain case.
Actually, with what Ken has said, I was thinking there probably is OSHA standards for these. And so I would imagine that the key here is to make sure that whatever hard hat or protective gear you have is up to whatever task you're going to put it through. That made sense to me, that if you're working on a high rise and somebody could drop something 10 floors up, you want the most solid hard hat you can get. And for a bump, I didn't even know those existed. So that was interesting. I've learned something today. Let's move on to the next question.
John Foltz from Sealings Grove, Pennsylvania. He's got an audio question for an ATEM Constellation. With 2 analog in, 16-channel Madi in, and audio in each SDI input, what are the best options for audio, especially using Dante with a Constellation?
And Guy is going to take a shot at this one for us.
Yeah, I'd imagine if you're not having to marry the audio up in something else, that you would have to run it through the ATEM. I mean, typically I would just bring it into the system. If you're in a software-based switcher like vMix or something, I would just let the Dante come in that way. But if you need to bring it in, then Madi would be the way through like a Ferrofish or a RedNet. I think even that blue device that a lot of us have picked up. I know Tucker has one. There's one at 090. I think it'll do the same thing. But yeah, otherwise you're going to be dumbing down the audio XLR. So basically you would go take like one of those little Avios and just drop it down to mux it down to left and right. So if you're going down to 16, yeah, Mitchell's got one there.
Nice. Mitch, what is it you're holding up?
Got a Avio. Hold on, let me just open it up. They make it for every flavor that you could possibly want. Here's a analog one right here. I got to get it in front of my eyes.
So that takes an analog signal and translates it into something Dante will understand and allows you to hook up
Correct.
into the Dante network.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I bought this from a guy at the DVE store. Thank you, Guy.
All right. So you're going to put that away really quickly, and then we're going to go on to the next question.
Next question is coming in from Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland. On Monday, the cheap tripod that came bundled with my Canon 80D failed. Any thoughts on or counter recommendations to this Manfrotto? And there's a link there. Sorry. That's it. That's the question.
We're going to start with John Preto on for this one. John?
So I've got a graphic queued. I think Dennis has it up. But I compared both of these, and I like the small rig better. It's actually lighter by 1.5 pounds or so, and it's way more sturdy than the Manfrotto. So I would check that out if he's got a. There's a link back here, but I had a graphic queued up to show this. Check out Small Rig. You'll find it's right on their homepage. I think it's better constructed than that Manfrotto for this. It's actually $20 cheaper.
Interesting. Mitchell Hill, thoughts?
Make that a Preto ditto. I agree that Small Rig is just a wonderful piece of equipment. I keep hearing great things about it. I just can't wait to see somebody actually have one in their hands so they can show it to us. But it's got everything. It's got a very sturdy tripod. It has a fluid head. Hopefully it's a real fluid head. And it looks like it's performing as advertised. And it's like $200 or a little less than that?
Yeah, it's amazing.
$159.
$159.
I'll take
Tripods, because so many people are using them nowadays, have become much more commodity, and you can get better. The only thing I would suggest, I looked at the one that was linked there, And for a photographer, it's a decent head. That 3-axis ball kind of head with the little handles to do it, that will not do you much good if you're shooting content and do any kind of video. So I don't know whether the ADD has any video capabilities, but if it does, be wary of those kind of set. I mean, I have both, because if I'm shooting still photography, I want that 3-axis control to get the shot frame exactly like I want, but that comes off immediately. And a actual fluid head that has pan and tilt damping comes on if I'm doing anything with video. Just makes video a lot easier to do properly. Let's move on to, Mitchell wants to come back in. Mitchell?
No, I just wanted to make an observation. If I was comparing it to the Sockler, which I have behind me, which has the famous Sockler fluid head, if it came even close to being as good as that Sockler, there's a difference of price. The Sockler there is about $3,000. Versus the 159, did you say, John? That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. And if you ever work actually with a legitimate, serious video tripod head, they are a different class of engineering altogether. And when you watch movies sometime and they actually pan, which they don't do that often, but when they do, you will find them using those kind of true professional tripod heads that let you do a very, very, very slow pan, as smooth as silk, because the damping is such that a good cinematographer behind there operating it can do any kind of move, whether that's a pan, a tilt, anything other than a truck in or truck out, which requires wheels or something else, and just keep the thing almost imperceptibly slow and smooth if that is their aesthetic choice. They are high precision, high level tools at the level Mitch is talking about with his Sockler and other. And Mitch has another thought on that.
Yeah, it's you can tell real fast if it's a good one versus a bad one. If you do exactly what Bill was just saying and you start to do a pan, if the pan remains steady right from the very beginning through the middle through to the end, that's a good video of a fluid head.
Yeah, what you're trying to do there is make whatever move you want and not distract the audience. And with inexpensive tripods, you'll find that there's a little jerk at the beginning to get the pan going, and then inconsistencies in the rate of pan across it. That doesn't mean that they're not useful. They still certainly are. I mean, in the language of filmmaking, when you do a pan, you're basically saying to the audience, look over here, there's something I want you to see. And then you pan to it to reveal it, and that keeps the audience engaged. But the quality of that pan across means that sometimes they just completely don't suspend that disbelief, which can be a cool thing, as opposed to saying, what happened with the tripod there? Anyway, I'm speaking too long about it. Let's go on to the next question.
Adrian Albach from Brisbane, Australia, or Olympic City to be specific, for 2031. Congratulations. For a government agency live streaming contract, I'm being asked, is the vendor a Star Alliance? There's a link to it, registrant. How many, if any, companies such as Vimeo and Zoom would meet compliance?
Ooh, this is a tough one for us because you're asking for government experience on the back end. I've done some government stuff, but I've never done it at the level where I needed something like that. I think that would probably be something that someone like Alex would have much more information on. So this may be a hold for another time. Come back. So it looks like STAR is security, trust, assurance, and risk. Somebody's got that up on the screen for us. So, these programs, sometimes you need compliance with something that industry cares about. I know I've run across things like SCORM compliance in contracting and things like that. And, it's one of those things where as you're coming up through the ranks and becoming more and more professional at your business, you're going to learn more and more about these bodies and these standards that you have to meet. And at some point in your career, you either decide I'm going to go to that level and I'm going to take the time to learn how this works, or I'm not. Lois has a thought about it too. Lois?
I think you might want to also be careful about what country you're in as to what applies to you there, or maybe something that applies to you worldwide. But, Australia is not the U.S.
That is true. And maybe there's something about the regulations or whatever in Australia that are different than what we have to deal with here in America, or not. I just don't know much about that. So I would come back if you can and save this question, bring it up when Alex is here, and maybe he or others who are on the panel at a different day might know more about that. Let's move on to the next question.
Daniel Goldstein from Washington, D.C. Given the two extremes of asking a client what they need and telling them the cost and asking what their budget is, and then only offering what can be done within that constraint, How do you balance these during initial planning with new clients?
John Pretto is going to start on this.
Half of our clients are paid events, and so it's easy for them to show an ROI on a digital first event over a traditional event. So we've had really good luck in articulating a ROI for those customers. And once you show them that they've got a better opportunity to make more ROI on digital first event, then you've got them. The other ones are a little harder sell.
Yeah, this is a delicate balance when you're in business, deciding how you approach giving quotes to people, what you concentrate on. I have had circumstances in my business career where two pieces of advice. Someone once told me early in there, the first person who puts down a number tends to lose. And that's either you're leaving money on the table with something, or you don't understand scope of work and you're going to give them a price and not understand that they're expecting far more from you than that price will allow. These are difficult things. I will say that you get to the point where you get more comfortable with this. And I had a point in my career where I was coming out of my kind of early middle period and my budgets were relatively low. And I was dealing with the principal across the table. And she said, the best word I have ever heard in my life, she said, "Can we keep this too?" And gave a number that was in 5 figures that I thought, wow, I've never had this much to work with. And she said, yeah, can you work on this package of 3 videos for this number? And it surprised me so much at how big the budget is that I stayed silent. And then she said the best word I've ever heard in my life, each. And I literally, by not saying a word, tripled the budget I had to work on that project. And I've never forgotten that. Sometimes discretion, getting to know the client, and for sure, getting to know the scope of work. And sometimes you find that that's what accelerates you into the next level of your career. It's Kenneth Jones, you're up.
Well, that's a great position to be in. That's for sure. When somebody gives you a figure that is beyond your wildest dream, say, yeah, I can do that. Sometimes whether or not the client speaks first or you speak first depends on how well you know this client, and particularly how well they know you. And so if you're going into a new client arrangement where you don't know them and they don't know you much, asking, well, what's your budget, tends to be off-putting. I find that sometimes it's easier to begin a conversation like this by showing some simple examples, not that the production was simple, but that the example shown is easy to understand at different price points and different levels of complexity. And you can say, these are the kinds of things that we do. We can do it at this level or at this level, at this level. And these are approximately in this dollar figure and so forth. And you speak in general terms and you don't get specific until you ask them, what do you think about that? And then listen to what they have to say. And you can eventually arrive at a meeting of the minds there. And it helps sometimes if when you present these examples, the customer says, whoa, well, that's beyond our expectations. You're done, and you can move on to the next customer, because it doesn't really help your bottom line if you spend a half a day explaining things that the customer doesn't understand, won't buy, can't afford, and you're just, well, it's a waste of time. So it's a gentle conversation that you have to have, but sometimes you have to lead it.
Words of wisdom. Lois, you're up next.
Well, I'd like to do a little follow-up on this. What Ken said is wonderful, but Kenneth, what happens when you're new and you don't have all those different price points, samples and examples and things? How do you get started doing this?
Well, if you're asking me specifically, I think the thing to do is use other people's money. OPM is the way to do that, and OPT, other people's talent, is also the way to do it. I wouldn't presume that you'd be entering into this market with no experience at all. These are the kinds of projects that I've worked on. These are the kinds of things that we do. Who's we? Well, we is the 400 people that I know that don't happen to work for me, but I can hire them if I need to. Let's talk. And so there's a certain degree of outrageous confidence that has to be expressed when you're doing this kind of stuff. Of course we can do that. How am I going to do that? Well, we'll figure that out in a moment here, but let's get things ironed out.
The word chutzpah comes to mind. Yeah, sometimes in your early days, you just got to try things and see if they work. You will win some and you will lose some. Well done, panel. Let's move on to the next question.
And it comes to us from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, BC. Can someone demo a Luma key with 5% black visible text? I can't get the ATEM settings right.
I don't know if we have anybody on the panel who has an ATEM setup with a Luma key that could do that. Mitchell Hill wants to weigh in on it.
I think Dennis can throw up a 5%. It's the difference between black and slightly off black, and it's 5% gray. So if you see a example here, he's going to show you some text that's being keyed with 5%. And if you go to something like 100% black, it would completely knock out the clip that you're trying to accomplish there. So the idea is to use text that's slightly off black out of the 255 steps of black that you can have there, and use the clip and the key gain to accomplish that using the ATEM. And the ATEM does that pretty well.
Absolutely. And I would say Alex has said something that it mirrors my experience. 99% of the time I use Luma keys to do all of my keying because I think they have all the refinement that I need. There are times when you can't. You have to use chroma key or some other form. But most of the time I end up using Luma keys, and in the modern software, they work extraordinarily well. Mitchell? Yeah,
and Alex also has pointed out before that a chroma key will be a problem on a curve. You'll end up getting the aliasing stepping effect, and a Luma won't do that, certainly not as much. So that's the best way to go there. And with alpha key, if you're lucky enough to have a device that has a very nice coincident alpha key cutout made, it literally cuts out a cookie cutter part of that video in order to place the image there. I tried doing that with my HyperDeck, but unfortunately, my HyperDeck doesn't seem to like to keep the alpha key and the video in sync.
And just as a reminder for those of you who are here today and didn't start us off with us at the very beginning, today is going to be all question and answer. We don't have a second hour. Alex had something arranged for us, but he got called away and has to do something else today. So if you have more questions, this would be a good day to get them answered and put them in. We will go through, we're cutting through these pretty well, as we always do. So just make sure that if you want to continue through the entire 2-hour process and you have questions that are unanswered, toss them in. Let's move on.
Next question from Lois Richter on the panel and from Davis, California. Lois says, Guy suggested an app and features that he wished would happen. What does the panel wish list have on it?
Oh, for Zoom, I assume. Guy, John Preto wants to high in on this one.
I think Guy and I have probably the same list here. So if they add breakout rooms to webinar where we can use the Q&A features inside of our events, breakout rooms into webinar feature, right? And then 4K video, and then isolated audio, isolated video. That platform would be super useful.
And Mitchell Hill wants to get in on this.
I think that I'd sure like to see isolated audio in the Zoom ISO. That would be part of the app that needs to be updated.
Interesting ideas. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Bobby Rafferty, all the way from Central Florida. Any suggestions on rigging up an iPhone?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. More and more people are putting them in cages or other things to make them a little more useful in field production. Guy Cochran's going to start us off here.
Yeah, I know that some of the panels have got the spall rig metal cage, which is pretty cool with being able to mount those quarter 20s and whatnot. And that looks pretty durable. I'd imagine it's pretty heavy. I haven't played with one of those. There's a guy named Chris Carson from Steady Ready that has been showing off this guy here, which is more of a DSLR-like film grip. So I'm used to that hold. And so you can put a battery inside of there. So it's just more natural to me to have that balance where you're holding onto it on the right side. So I would look at this, and then it has some accessories as well to be able to, change out the lenses and things like that. So that's what the unit looks like. And then here's the accessories, which would allow you to further rig it out. So the accessory kit here, $29, would allow you to get that flash shoe. So if you want to put like a Road Go or something on top, but yeah, that's the one that I would look at. I think it's like 100. I haven't bought this yet, but I trust Chris. He's done a ton of these types of events. He has, if you go to his website, I'll put a link in the chat. His guys use like 5 cameras on events where they're running around with these. So I'd take a look at that.
Nice. Mitchell Hill.
A guy is spot on, because as the quality of pictures that a iPhone can generate begin to get darn close to a professional video camera, you want to start using it like a video camera. And you can't do it by holding, you can't use your iPhone like this and take pictures. You want to have handles on it on either side. And small rig is a good place to start. It, in addition to being more attachment positions on your iPhone, it protects it.
Yeah, absolutely. And based on Alex's recommendation, I bought the small rig as well. The only thing that, and it's not a problem, it's actually a feature. I need to take off any plastic case to get in, because it's precision machined to the point where the iPhone itself is incredibly well secured inside of it. Now, I tend to use that small rig exoskeleton, that cage, when I'm working with a monopod and I have it on a really tight rig. And for me, the fact that I'm going to be taking my phone, which is already more than $1,000 worth of investment, and I'm going to be swinging it upside down and I'm going to be holding up at the top of things, not to damage that and have to go through the whole insurance hassle means that I need to keep it as stable a system as is humanly possible. So that's one of the reasons that I'm glad to have some sort of cage on my phone. Even though it's a little inconvenient to have to take my bumper protection that I use daily off to put it in that, I do feel incredibly secure once that clip goes snap and it's in there. This other system sounds like it does the same thing. Good engineering on these means they're all, I think, an extra level of safety for what is, after all, a very delicate piece of amazing technology. So +1 for me for rigs around to ensure extra safety with whatever you're shooting with. Let's move on to Kenneth Jones' question.
Kenneth Jones on the panel and in Seattle, Washington. So, is Bluetooth-enabled water bottle a bit over the line, or is this just the normal expansion of technology into every nook and cranny of our lives?
Let's dive into Lois Richter now, and then Kenneth Jones.
I'll go with B.
Okay. That moves us on to Kenneth.
Yeah, that's my idea as well. Well, I happened to be watching MacBreak Weekly yesterday, and our friend Alex was there. And towards the end of that program, they have a new and nifty thing that each one of the participants brings to the group to explain. And dear Alex brought a Bluetooth-enabled water bottle that comes in sizes and different colors, and you charge it up occasionally. And apparently, it works with an app that tracks to your iPhone or to your some kind of phone anyway, and keeps track of how much water you have taken from the bottle during the course of a day. And I'm not sure whether it's in terms of tips or swallows or weight or how this works, but it's a highly technical arrangement to get more of this stuff into this thing. And it's a novel approach, I think. And it was something like, well, it didn't cost an Alex, but it was about a tenth of an Alex, I think, or a ninth perhaps. So it was an interesting concept. And it seems to me that there is a limit to technology and where it should go. And in my opinion, we have passed it.
I'm going to weigh in on this a little bit. I was shocked. And I'm going to tell you, for me, I got one of the original Apple Watches, and it had a bit of a change that I wasn't expecting. And it reflects off to something that a lot of people have known for a long time, is that it doesn't matter what you measure, but what you measure does matter in this respect. The fact that my watch started tracking certain behaviors, the amount of time I was walking, the amount of time I was standing, the amount of time I was in actual exercise mode, I found had a profound effect on me psychologically. So for the people who are metrics driven and wish to monitor fluid intake, I can see them needing something like this or wanting something like this, probably not needing it. But to actually do those measurements, as somebody in your doctor's office might ask you to measure the amount of fluid you're drinking because that has an impact on some aspect of your health or pre-operation or whatever. These things can be real motivators for people just by virtue of the fact that you put yourself in a system where you pay attention rather than ignoring something like what your fluid intake is. I know that my watch and the updated one I bought later has changed my behavior way more than I would expect. And it surprised me, and I laughed at myself a lot because it's silly at one level. I mean, why does anybody care about a ring being closed? I don't get anything from it. But the mere fact of tracking it has had an impact on my behavior, and it's been an impact I've enjoyed having. So in that respect, I think it's good. Lois wants to get back in on it, and then Mitchell. So Lois.
So, I'm all about low-tech solutions for technology-driven things. So I've got a jug. It's a half-gallon jug of water. And then every day when I have my glass, I just fill it up from the jug. At the end of the day, I see how much water I drank.
I'm sure that works perfectly. Mitchell Hill?
I think we need to think a little more out of the box. I think it should tell you that, Mitch, you've had enough sugar water for today. That sugar content is way too high. Or, aren't you getting a little, and it's not until after 4 o'clock and you have an alcoholic beverage. I think it needs to be more invasive and serious. And by the way, if it isn't part of the Predo gear collection, it's not on my radar screen.
So you're welcoming for our sentient computer overlords to come in and control those things.
Yes.
Kenneth Jones.
Invasive. Yeah, that's the watchword for the day. So Roscoe Jones over in chat, the man after my own heart, mentions that a Bluetooth water filter is next on the horizon. And frankly, I'm sure that was meant tongue in cheek, so to speak, but that might have some value if it could actually measure the content of terrible things coming out your spigot. So there may be some point to all this, but I remain skeptical.
It's too late for me, Kenneth.
We know the Internet of Things is coming, and more. And think about the number of processors you are surrounded by now versus where you were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. It is an exponential growth. I don't think it's going to get any easier, particularly when we know that those near-field chips and things like that are coming in half the products we bring into our house just to help in inventory. Not that there's anything necessarily other than benign in the way they're using them, but it's just a part of the life we're living right now. A lot of people want to track a lot of things. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. My Nomad 6-quart traveling slow cooker has been a lifesaver on site for feeding crews, runs great off of a small inverter or battery pack. What have you used on small gigs where there's no extra crew and no restaurants?
Ooh, craft services, one of the biggest and most important parts of production. As everybody knows, especially if you're just starting out in your career and you're working on some indie film project and have dreams of going big, you can do everything that you don't know how to do and fail with them all. But if you fail to feed people on your cruise, you're going to have a hard time getting people to show up for your next one. Oh, that's cool. So there's the slow cooker. That looks really kind of cool. It is important and not just to be nice to people. I mean, one thing that has always surprised me is on every shoot, I come back at the end of the shoot, no matter what my role is. In the beginning of my career, when I was really just hanging on and paying attention, I would come back and I would crash out. The amount of energy you spend in doing something like creating content is surprisingly high. And if you don't provide nourishment there, if you don't provide water, some sort of snacks and a meal, and you're asking people to put in, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 hours of work, it's counterproductive not to pay attention to this and get it as right as you can. So literally, my wife and I, when we were running our business through most of the years, spent probably as much time on craft services, design and delivery as we did on any other aspect of our productions. And I think it was time and effort well spent. Mitchell Hill wants to weigh in on this.
Yeah, in a pinch, a package of Hot Pockets will work wonders.
Yeah, perhaps. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Adrian Albach from Brisbane, Olympic City 2031. Congratulations, Adrian. Does Vimeo provide a public-facing SIP gateway like Zoom does?
I'm not sure I know what that is, but maybe Guy does. Guy's going to weigh in on this.
Yeah, SIP is generally used in corporate offices for connecting IP phones. I know that Zoom does have a SIP connector. We use Zoom Rooms, and you can pay to bring in SIP lines. So I'd probably go that route. And then Vimeo has the free app, which is Livestream Studio, which once you get the Zoom Room and get that client connected, you just go down to the bottom left and you'll see Add Input, and then you can pin your NDI guests, and then you would bring them in this way through NDI. So then you can suck them in, and that way you would have those people. So that's one way of doing it, is with the free software in a Zoom Room.
I will just note also that Vimeo was one of my secret weapons in the beginning of my corporate career, because almost every corporation that I worked with of any size would have YouTube blocked just so that their people in the corporate tower or whatever wouldn't watch it during regular business days. And Vimeo, they never bothered to block in those early days. So I used to be able to do a lot of distribution of content into my clients through Vimeo that I couldn't do through YouTube. I know things have changed a lot since then, and this is another level above that. But it's all these little things we have to think of as the internet and as distribution of content changes over the course of these years going through. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Universe will be running a 20% off Blue Week promotion from the 27th of June through July 4th. Would it be worth it to purchase a license to become familiar with the software, even without a current use case? Should I purchase a standard or pro license? And
Guy Cochran's going to take us into this.
I don't know if it's worth it right at the moment, unless you have a use case to purchase this software, because there is, if you don't get the full pro version, it's an ongoing fee, which I learned the hard way. So I bought it on Black Friday, and I believe it was a similar type of sale. But then I didn't go full pro because I talked to Jonas, and he was like, you don't really need. And who else? The guy who helped us design the backend for Office Hours 2.0, he bought the pro version, and he asked me some questions. And I was like, hey, I'll just go with the non-pro version. But then I got hit with the you got to pay $300 to keep it working. So I didn't realize that it was a subscription type model. But you can run the software for $0 without. The inputs will time out. So if you say bring in like an NDI source, it'll time out. So if you just want to get familiar with the interface, just use the free version. But if you have a use case, it's not cheap software. I mean, the pro version is like $2,000 US. So 20% off isn't that big of a deal. And maybe somebody can correct me in the chat if there's a better deal on Black Friday. You might want to wait, dabble with it or borrow somebody else's license. I mean, talk to me. I'm not using my in a DM or something. Talk to me. See if I can just shuffle my license over to you if you have a true need, if you're really going to dig in and learn this stuff, because it's a lot. Unless you have a use for this software, I don't know if I'd go learning it, because I went down that rabbit hole for a little bit, and it's a lot to learn, but it's powerful. If you look at the list of items that it can control, it's amazing. So, but again, you got to have the use.
What a generous offer, Guy. And again, this is Office Hours from day one has been about building community. It's often, even if you don't know somebody, if you know somebody who knows this stuff, then you're still good. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Okay, is there any USB microphones with noise cancellation under $200?
And Mitchell Hill's going to start us off on this.
Few microphones would include that as a specific electronic filter. I mean, some of them just might be inherently good for noise, but it's usually on a separate device. And your limitation of 200 is really sticking you in a corner, because even if you bought the great noise assist from Mike for your mic pre from Sound Devices, that's $300 just for that for one channel. So I'm not sure we can meet your requirements there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Mitchell just said. Noise assist, the Cedar system, those were originally developed technologies that were closely held, patented, and for years you could only get them by buying the products that they were involved with. Also, you don't really put them on the microphone. They're kind of a post-processing way to look at things, although noise assist now being included with the mix pre's. You can use them in real times, and Cedar has a similar system, but it's just a different way of looking at things. And that price point, I think, is substantially too low to get you into those kind of devices. You can take any microphone, certainly anything under $200, and attach it to a device that is licensed and running this kind of noise reduction, which is amazing, but not probably inside the microphone. John Pretto has some thoughts, and then Kenneth. Go ahead, John.
Mr. Widener is a personal friend. He was at the rocket shoot. You know the answer to this question. You ask better questions than this. He already knows the answer to this.
Wow. Kenneth Jones. That's what friends are for.
And a lot of times when we ask questions on this program, we ask it on behalf of others. I notice just parenthetically that over the course of the months, the questions that are posed here tend to rise in their technical level. And sometimes it's good to go back to what's the standard phrase, back to basics, because there are people who tune into this thing and they are just blown apart by the technology that we're discussing. I am one of those people, and I enjoy occasionally returning to the simpler parts of technology. When you're speaking, for example, and I will make a supposition here that is not stated. When you're talking about a USB microphone, that to me sounds like a single use rather than something that a mix pre might be more suited for, which is, I believe, essentially a field mixer that is pressed into service as a single channel device in a Zoom meeting. So you're taking a $1,000 device, the mix pre plus noise assist, and using it with one microphone on one Zoom meeting at a time. That's okay if that's where you go. And if you've got this thing from another use, from your regular use of this product. However, if you're looking for a USB microphone and a way to keep the noise down when you're using it, you might want to look for a software solution, one of which is from, the name promptly escapes me, Audio Hijack, which uses a series of building blocks that you can make an audio chain that will feed then into a Zoom or any other kind of PC or, well, in this case, Mac-based application. I am using such a thing right now, and it's the compressor circuit that works both as a compressor, which is to reduce the maximum level of loud sounds to something manageable. And the other end of that spectrum is an expander, which expands the quiet down. It makes the quiet things more quiet. So I refer to that as a negative expander. It makes the resultant room noise less noticeable. When you begin, and it takes some adjustment in order to be able to find this sweet spot, but there's a nice little moving graph that shows you what you're doing there. When you speak, you pop out of negative expansion, and when you stop speaking after a little bit, it goes down a little or a lot, and that's a finite adjustment that you need to make there so that it doesn't sound like a gate, which just closes off everything when you're done speaking. And yeah, we don't like gates a lot. That's noticeable audio manipulation, and you don't really want it to be noticeable. So you might want to look at a software solution. I like Audio Hijack and its noise blocks. That seems to work very well.
Well explained, Kenneth. Thank you. Mitchell Hill wants to dive in to the end of this.
Yeah, I think Kenneth hit it spot on, especially the difference between a gate and an expander. Just to make it clear, on a gate, which I do happen to have, but I really don't like it on my Aphex channel, it chops. It decides, here's the threshold, and I'm turning it off. And the problem is when you come back and you start talking, it usually hacks off the first part of the waveform of the first part of the sound that's coming in. Very unnatural. An expander, on the other hand, does exactly the opposite of what a compressor does. It just it eases the volume. It's literally like somebody just taking the volume and turning it up like that at a predetermined speed. So it does both work. As to the question, I think it's a fair use question that Chris has asked here, because even if he knows better, sorry, Pretto, but maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe if we discuss the fact that there should be a $200 option out there, that maybe we could conjure it into existence just because we all want it.
That would be interesting. All right, let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. At the Super Bowl halftime show, Dr. Dre had 2 deaf rappers as sign language interpreters. Should hardware and software vendors in our industry think more about accessibility? How should you work with a deaf-blind artist as a producer-engineer?
Good question. And this is one of those things. I spent a lot of years working for an organization called Sunsounds, and it was tremendous. And they work with people who are visually impaired. And, the single thing that I came away from that, actually, there were 2 things that I came away in terms of my interaction with people in the disabled community. The first is that I always refer to them in a way that acknowledges their personhood before their disability. So it's never a blind person. It is always a person with a visual disability. If you keep the person up front whenever you're writing or talking or interacting, that's what all of us want. We want to be seen for who we are, not our differences. And so that was the number one thing that helped me. The other thing was to just, it is difficult. And I remember the day that I brought my son into the person who ran the organization, who was entirely without sight. And I could just see Mike being uncomfortable in terms of how do I interact with this? And I tried to help him by saying, he's holding his assistant stick in his left hand. So you're going to reach out with your right hand. And then just before we walked off, Bill had switched hands with his stick. So it was one of those moments where you're trying to explain something and you just try to normalize it as much as possible and say, this is what it is. You're trying to be as unaffected by whatever that disability is as you can naturally. But if you have something that's a little uncomfortable issue, just be honest about it. I mean, that's all any of us want, is to somebody treat us for who we are, look us in the eye. And even if they can't respond, you're still going to act like this is exactly the same as every interaction I have with anybody else out there. Do that, I think you're going to be in good shape most of the times. Just don't define people by what they can't do. Define people by the many, many, many fabulous things they can do, no matter what classification they're in life. Lois, you had some thoughts.
Well, I have a friend who is in a wheelchair and is missing a limb. And we were talking about it one day, and they said, it's annoying when people come up to you and say, oh, what happened? And expect them to explain their life history. But it is nice when they meet someone who has never seen them before and they're asked, is there anything that you would like me to do when I'm around you? And I mean, that's a very upfront thing to do, and some people might be offended. But he said, I know that they're seeing me and they're thinking about me, and it was useful.
Yeah, that resonates with me. It's just pay attention. That's really most of what it is. And imagine, how would you like to be treated? And the answer for most of us is as normal as humanly possible, because there are just another person there, whatever circumstance they are facing in life that makes it perhaps difficult, or perhaps the things that you think are difficult aren't difficult at all for them. Anyway, let's move on, because I'm not an expert at this, and I don't think any of us are. But thank you for the question, because every time we can talk about this and maybe help people come a little closer to not being to not feeling uncomfortable when they have to meet somebody who is different in any way, because we're all different than everybody else we meet. Anyway, let's just move on.
Speaking of questions, we're heading into another hour, and we're going to do another hour of questions. So now would be a good time for any of our producers out there to submit them to this wonderful panel that's doing a great job of answering the first hour questions in a very thorough and articulate manner. Thank you very much. Next question coming in from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Could now legacy video matrix switchers, Extron and others with individual RGBHV and BNC ins and outs be repurposed to switch SDI signals, such as cameras, to multiple output destinations? Are there modern uses for such legacy devices?
And Guy Cochran's going to weigh in on this.
Sure. Yeah, those are analog signals. So converting them over to digital, they're going to be a little bit softer than what you're used to seeing. If you're used to seeing modern cameras and text coming from a computer that's pure digital, those when I go back to that stuff, you can totally tell. So I would say unless you have a real use, because like maybe the infrastructure is already embedded in the walls or there's long runs, I wouldn't bother converting, because basically you need what the Blackmagic makes them, they call them SDI to analog converters, and the analog converters will have those RGB BNCs, so you can convert, but sometimes it's just chasing, throwing bad money after good, because that stuff's not going to look as good as what you think it'll look like. So I'd probably ditch it and move along. I mean, you can get an ATEM for cheap, so I'd probably go that route.
Mitchell Hill wanted to weigh in on this too.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Guy, wouldn't an analog RGB device have some bandwidth issues trying to switch SDI?
Well, if you're converting it into its format, it doesn't matter. So you're taking the digital and you're converting it to analog, or the other way around. You're putting it into its format, so it doesn't matter unless you're trying to do something like 4K, which of course that analog stuff won't do. So there's no 12G, 6G, any of that. It's hard to say what his in and out is, his source going in and where his destination is. That's really what the question should be. Is I have this and I want to convert it to that. So if it's like a modern projector, because believe it or not, they still had this at Adobe. I went there to do a live stream and they caught me kind of off guard. Thankfully, I had a data video. There's a little converter that they have that's an SDI to analog converter box, the DAC 70, which it's like a decimator, which a lot of us have the MDHX in our tool bag, but the real one to have is the DAC 70, especially since those ones, the MDHXs, are hard to find right now. But yeah, Adobe had that old school RGB projector when I went in there to do a live stream, and I had to tap in so that the presenter could see the screen, and we could tap into the feed to live stream it out. So luckily I had a DAC 70, was able to pass through all that. And it's kind of crazy that people still use that, because it's also VGA, because you can, and that's just old, so it's not worth converting all this stuff, throwing $700 converter boxes on each end. Now you're in at $1,400 for what? Soft video.
Mitchell Hill's up next.
Actually, the question was answered. Guy was responding to my question about bandwidth issues.
Excellent. Okay, so we got it taken care of. Let's move on to the next question.
Walt Palmer from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I'm considering the purchase of the NexiGo N970P 4K webcam. Any recommendations or comments?
And thankfully, our hardware expert Guy is back again. Guy.
I'm hogging them. There's been a couple of knockoffs of the Huddle Cam. I like the Huddle Cam because of the support and what they have as far as the firmware. But somebody was saying that you can actually, I think it was Jeffrey Powers was saying that there was another one like a Vimeo or something like that, where he took the firmware from Huddle Cam and put it on, and it still worked. So I bought one of these as well, not that exact model, but another one. And the image quality is good if you light it. So that's the thing is. At 4K, it's going to be zoomed all the way out. So this is what they call an EPTZ. So that remote is pretty nifty. You can zoom in, so it's a 4K resolution that you punch in. So it's outputting HD into zoom, for instance, and that way you can cruise around. But the back is neat because it has an HDMI out, so you can use those simultaneously. So for like a cooking show or something like that, these are great kind of POV type shots or overhead shots. I like them. I think they're okay. I use one at the office all the time. Again, you got to get some light on it because of those small chips. It's going to not look very, very good if it starts to crawl with gain. So you really got to light these things to make them shine.
And I think that's it. So let's move on to the next question.
Danny Law, Malaysia. Some budget 4K point tilt zoom cameras have 1 to 1.8 inch and 1 to 2.8 CMOS sensors for close-up talking heads type of show. Would this suffice, knowing that it's always nice to have a 1-inch CMOS sensor if you could budget for it?
And our hardware expert is going to raise his hand on this again. Thank you, Guy.
Yeah, same thing as the last question. It's that lighting thing. I mean, gosh, you can get away with these small chips if you light stuff. And I mean, just when somebody's standing in a room, I've been doing this so long that I can see the light, so to speak. I can see if somebody's well lit, and I go, wow, that looks good. Like, I'll even pause sometimes. Like, if I'm walking with somebody and I'm like, wow, you just stepped in the light, and I'll take a picture and be like, take a look. Like, doesn't that look great? But that's what it is. It's great lighting and not having to use these small sensors into their gain stage that makes video just fall apart. So this is where going to an NAB or something like that really is helpful. I've been wanting to make a website. I bought the domain name PTZ Haven just to compare this type of thing, where I wanted to put up like, here's $1,000 PTZ, and then that highest end one at the Panasonic's top end range is 10 grand. So you go from 1,000 to 10,000, and it's not just the sensor at that point, it's the glass and it's the motors. So if you're using the motors, now all of a sudden, can you follow somebody and get, a smooth, have it be usable? Because a lot of people use PTZ cameras as just a call to the preset while you're off air. So it's nice to have two of them so you can get to the spot where you want. But it's pretty jarring if you have a low end PTZ, because it'll get over there, but it'll feel like you just whip the person around. So if you can talk to people that have them, I mean, you're doing the right thing by asking the question here. I wish I had more stuff set up had I been prepared. In fact, I usually have my bird dog sitting right there, which Eric Nathan, fellow panelist, is coming down from Bellingham today to borrow it for a shoot this weekend. So maybe ask him what he thinks of the bird dog P200. That's about a $2,799 camera with a pretty big sensor, and it's full NDI. So that's it. That's the other part of this, is a lot of these, if you're using them NDI, they're NDI HX, which is not full NDI. So you get color that has been substantially smashed. And when you look at it again at like an NAB, it's dramatic. Like it's shocking how much of a difference that full NDI versus NDI HX, because you're 120 megabits a second versus like 10. So there's a lot more to it than just the sensor size.
Lois has a comment on that, but I want to note just first, since we're just past the top of the hour, if anybody is coming specifically for the originally noted second hour conversation here, that Alex was unable to make it today. He had a call away. So that's going to be rescheduled, and we're going to continue on for a second hour of questions. Lois, go ahead.
So my question to Guy, well, always to Guy, is when you say it has to be well lit, is there a meter that I can, walk around with and go, okay, well, it's this number and that'll be okay. It's this number that's too low. I know when we did still photography, we would have little meters to see what our lighting was like. Anything like that exist, and is it good to use?
Yeah, you could use a modern day meter if you know what you're doing. You can set the ISO. So if you could find the native ISO of that chip, it's the same thing. Like a 320, for instance, ISO is one of the more optimum ones. If you have like a pocket cinema camera, maybe it's 800 for the native ISO. And then, you would just meter to that. So it'd be 1/60th of a second, ISO 320, and then it's exposure at that point. But quality of light is really what I'm talking about as well. So exposure helps bring it into the dynamic range that camera really wants to see. But then it's like I'm using a nice soft light, which, if I kick this one off, I mean, you can see what happens. So this is nice soft light where you can see how it kind of wraps around my face, and it's just nice light. It's a $199 ring light that's lighting me from the side. But then I got this, $2,000 setup with a aperture P300 in front of me that's a soft box with an egg crate, and it creates really soft, nice light. So if you were to be standing here, you'd be like, dang, that does look good in reality. So that's the thing, is somebody who's been doing this a while and has the right tools, they can make almost any camera look good, because, I mean, that $200 one that we just referred to, I can make it look good. And I'm sure Bill and Mitchell and John, Kenneth, I'm not sure how much you've been doing lighting, but a lot of us that have been doing this a while, we just look at the light, how it drops on somebody, and you can tell if it's going to make a good output.
100% agree. You learn to see light as opposed to seeing the person who's being lit. It is a different thing. Mitchell, you go ahead and dive in. I have one more thing.
Don't be afraid to use a scope, because in the video business, a scope's going to tell you more specific things to the video. I mean, if you know how to use a light meter and you come from a photographic background, it probably equates better. But more and more people are using scopes for making that decision.
Absolutely. And there's another thing that the more moderns are building, and it's called false color, and it maps colors to particular levels of light. I use one all the time in field shooting, whether it's outdoors or indoors. And when you invoke false colors, I have one of them set to 70 IRE, which is a good skin tone balance. So I don't roll the camera unless I can get the face into that correct zone, and I will see that as a overlay of kind of a pink color on the face. when you invoke false color on the monitor, you're no longer using it as I'm judging the colors in this other than technically. But it also says that when that false color gets to pure white, I'm up at the top of the range, and anything above that, anything I'm seeing in yellow is going to have no detail because it's just shooting 255, 255, 255. Everything is maxed out. And if I want detail in the sky or the windows or something behind them, I have to adjust, either bring the window down through gelling or something like that. But it tells you exactly what the light levels are of everything that your camera is actually seeing. And I found it to be a tremendous tool. You can do the same thing with meters. You can do the same thing with scopes. You can do the same thing with your eyes. As Guy was saying, once you're trained to see light and how light functions, and it's a joy because literally you walk into a scene, you set up the camera, and you go, that's not going to work. Let me bring that in over to this side. You get it roughed in, and then you finally turn your monitor on and go, okay, I've still got a few little tweaks, but at least I know I got the basic stuff roughed in correctly. So, Lois, you're just on a journey to learn lighting, and it takes a while, but it's a really useful skill to have. Thanks, and let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Richard Bowman in Defiance, Ohio. I'm a 53-year-old working in tech, security, and IT. My world revolves around solving problems. I feel like pretty much most of the artistic creativity that I had when I was younger has been sapped out of me over the years. How do I get that back?
Yeah, this will be a useful question for everybody here. Let's start with Mitch.
Well, Richard, you don't have to worry about getting it back because it's still there. If you're doing something that relates to your love of technology, then, you just have been sort of ignoring it for a little while. You need to get immersed back in it. I'm 67 years old, and I dove back into office hours almost a year ago, and I can't imagine telling you how much I've learned just in that amount of time. The interest itself, the fact that you want to learn, is really 90% of what you need, and the rest of it just comes naturally because you're immersed in it every single day, especially if you're here.
Absolutely. John Preto's next.
So unless you want to draw pretty pictures with AES encryption 256 SHA, then this is really weird. I am part of a group called Archuary, and there's a list of a word of the day, and you have to draw a picture for that word. And so all of January, every day, we draw a little pretty picture, and you post it in this Facebook group. It's a lot of fun. For techie guys, it's a lot of fun.
Kenneth Jones up next.
Lots of mental exercise there, John. That's great. I've got you by 20 years, and I still find it fascinating to live one day at a time and see what I don't know. It's the relentless pursuit of ignorance, as I once heard somebody say on YouTube, finding out what you don't know and then trying to do something about that. I think what you might find is that your life experience is now limiting you in embracing new possibilities. Some younger folks who are brought into an industry find that they are able to do, well, maybe their superiors find that they are able to do things that the superior had never thought of because the superior, having had the experience, understands that it's not possible to do that. The young one who doesn't know that it's impossible to do that just goes ahead and does it. And what do you know? It works. So think less, perhaps, about what you know doesn't work and embrace things with a fresh mind. I think that might help.
Lois.
So I have been an artist for a long time. Since we're doing ages, I'm 72. And there are times when I have lost my creativity. And usually there were times when something stressful was going on in my life, the last 5 years of my mom and stuff like that. But what I found is that if I'm not got my own inspiration, I take classes. I find some little local group, nothing professional, but just, the senior center, the art center, kids groups, whatever, and learn some technique that I don't know. And during that class, I may get excited about it. I may get interested in it. I may go home and think, well, if I did that, I could do this. And suddenly I'm sparked. Now that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. For some people, being in a class is a competition, and it's like I have to be good at this before I go to this class. Okay, so if you're that kind of person, then maybe watch a video on YouTube and then go out in the garage and get a couple cans of paint and do it. I encourage you to try fluid acrylics. It's wonderful. It's easy. It's simple, and you have no control over it, so you don't have to be thinking I'm not good enough. But anyway, I hope that your inspiration comes back, your artistic creativity comes back. And the other thing you can do is you can simply call one of us up. Call me up anytime. We'll talk. We'll figure something out. I'd be happy to do that.
Mitch Hill is up next. Thank you, Lois.
First, I want to say I'm shocked that Lois announced her age on open mics here in office hours. But you don't look anything like that age, Lois. That was a shocker for me. But the second thing is that do what Lois does. I mean, Lois, and here's a compliment for her. She's a bit older than some of us here. She's not afraid to ask a question. She is, bullish with questions, and she asks them in this sometimes boys club here, and she holds her own every time. So if you're not afraid to ask a question, you're not showing that you're stupid or anything like that, or you're behind the times. You're asking because you're genuinely interested, and you're not going to let that thing slide by without asking what's an SDK or whatever the case may be. So Lois, that's a compliment to you, and it's encouragement to our friend Richard to say, ask the question, you'll get the answer. And if you can't get it here, learn about it. You can learn those things, and you never get too old to do that.
So much good advice here. And it's just, for me, and this is a process, I felt the same way about video after maybe 5 or 6 years of just being head down doing them. And it still was interesting, but it was becoming less creative thing. For me, what twisted me is that I had started taking some still photos, and people asked me to do it for money, and I constantly said, no, I just want this to be my playground. I could justify it even when I was in the heart of my career because I was still learning about lighting and things but I was looking at it from a different perspective. So sometimes finding, maybe if in technology, maybe decide that you're going to create a breadboard and wire something that's gorgeous and doesn't go anywhere. Find ways. I guess what I'm saying is that I found ways to take something that I have to do and make it something that I wanted to do by just spinning that a little bit in a different direction. The other thing is to just say, no matter, John Lennon, I think, famously said, life is what happens while you're making other plans. If you don't plan for something in your life that resonates with you creatively, it's really easy to just not do it. It's the easiest thing in the world to not do something. To have a time for it, to set aside a little mental energy and say, every day, every week, every whatever, I'm going to accelerate this piece of something that I was once interested in. I'm going to write 10 lines of poetry, or I'm going to draw something, or I'm going to cartoon something, or I'm going to, see if I can absolutely perfectly parallel a breadboard of a circuit design that I thought of or something. All of those are artistic expressions. And so if you're just doing a little bit, I think it can satisfy that little piece of you. I hope you find your answer, but thank you for bringing up the question, because this has been a fascinating discussion, and I've truly enjoyed listening to the other panelists talk about this. This is great. Let's move on.
Douglas Carmichael's in with the next question. Ken Cleary, UNC Sports Media Director, recently praised the value of in-person connection at the Sports Video Group Summit. With platforms like Office Hours 2.0 and After Hours, can that same connection be fostered?
Boy, this is a big subject. And I just have to tell you, from my point of view of having been a part of office hours and stumbling in here, I think I have more I feel honestly, deeply in my heart, like I have more in-person connection here than I have had in the last 20 years of my life. And it's because like-minded people came here, and we all knew we were facing this pandemic and we were going to get cut off to a certain degree. That first week where I was facing shutting down my life because of the medical circumstances that surrounded us, and was wondering, what I was going to do. I think I mentioned on office hours, like I signed up for a lot of those online things like masterclass and stuff like that. I said, at least I'll learn some things while I can't see any of my friends or do anything. And stumbling into this just flipped everything on its head. And I can't tell you how getting involved in this group, which is an entirely not in-person connection, but has, because of meeting people and getting to know them in this format, have led many of us to try to find ways to brush up against these people in real life. Things like some of our office hours space program and the working. I haven't seen the people from the band side, from the remotes in person, but I genuinely do think I have more friends, more people that if I was in their city, I would absolutely in a heartbeat say, let's go have a drink and just talk and shake hands finally. And so I think this can easily be the first step in widening your social circle, but you've got to get over that initial, oh, I don't think I could do that. Yes, you can. Come join us, or find another group, but they are out there. And this global connection through Zoom and through other services like this have enabled people who you would never have a chance to meet before to come into your sphere of influence, and you can figure out whether they resonate with you. And when they do, make a friend this way. It's maybe only step one. It's not everything, but it's certainly been a very positive thing for me. So let's move on to the next question.
Morgan Price from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I finally rebuilt my blanket fort office with maker pipe. So much better than my auto pole fort. Have others in office hours built maker pipe parts of their offices?
Oh, does this deeply go back to our childhoods, right? We all loved that first fort with the dining room table and a couple of chairs when your friends were over and you wanted to play with them. In any case, I do not, yes, trying to do something to, most of it is to help our office space be better for audio recording, right? That's most of the time I've spent under ad hoc tents in my adult life. I've been in a hotel somewhere trying to do a voiceover, and I needed to get sound abated somehow. So you end up decloaking the bed and building a tent, taking a microphone in there and trying to get extraneous sound out there. But I don't know whether, auto poles would be more expensive than maker pipe parts. I'm glad you found a utility in those. These adult tinker toy things, I think a lot of us find fascinating. Tent building with pipes and PVC and things like that, I think is just fun. So I think if you want to do that, do it. Have fun with it. Mitchell Hill has something to say about this.
Bill, I can't believe you mentioned the hotel room hodgepodge.
Voice booth, yeah.
I did that with the closet on one side and the blanket over me, and I threw it over the folding bifold door to get the little more sound. And, of course, the maid walks in while I have a microphone under it. This week only at Mack Hike Ford. And she's, like, staring at me like, what are you doing? So it has its embarrassing moments, too. But it's fun.
It is. And, what are you going to do? We've all been there, and we'll all go back there another time. You do what you need to get the job done when the time comes to get the job done, period.
And you lock the door.
Yeah,
I thought I did. Yeah. But they have a key,
Maid, leave me alone. Anyway, thanks very much for the question. Let's move on to the next one.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. After being stung by connecting mixer to the ATEM Mini and experiencing awful delays and issues, I've started connecting audio to preamp and into computer via USB. Is that best practice? What is the best approach to this?
Guy's going to start you out here.
Yeah, I think that's best practice. Some people will take it if they have a camera that has XLR inputs. It's a higher quality camera. They'll bring it in through HDMI and then just use that audio because it is synced up nicely. But a lot of us will use some kind of delayer in a software or somewhere downstream to marry that back up and dial it in perfectly. So, for example, I'm using ATEM into vMix software, and then the Mix Pre 6 from Sound Devices brings in my audio. So I have analog XLR coming in, it gets converted to digital, and then in that input, I adjusted it at 120 milliseconds, which I found was the optimum for this show, and that was by using some of Photo Joseph has some video files that you can use to find that sync. I'll put a link in the chat to figure out how to do that so you can dial it in perfectly.
What Guy said. Plus, I find that when you get up into the slightly upper end hardware, my Universal Audio Apollo Solo is a Thunderbolt connected device, and my mic runs directly into that. That is runs separately into Zoom, but there's such little latency in the device that I think my sync is always, unless the computers on the Zoom side of it mess up my sync, it's imperceptible. So sometimes you don't have to be as concerned depending on the hardware you use, but it's an issue. Mitchell wanted to weigh in.
Bill, if you run your audio preamp or your Apollo device directly into your computer and you're using the audio from your ATEM, how do you combine the two? Are you using hijack or some kind of looping?
I'm using video only, so it's a dual system. So the ATEM handles only the video signals for me. I have no audio running through it at all. The audio is entirely separate, and it's this mic plugs into the Universal Audio Apollo Solo. That is a Thunderbolt connection into my laptop, and that is my audio chain. It doesn't go through the ATEM at all. Kenneth Jones looks like wants to get in on this.
Yeah, it's discouraging to hear that you're having such problems with the ATEM. In my simplest use case, church audio, I feed the audio into the ATEM mic 1 input set for line level, and the audio feed comes from a monitor output on the board in the house, and that comes balanced up to the desk where everything is set, and then it plugs into a passive DI box wired or arranged in reverse, much to the chagrin of people who think they know what those things should do and only do, and that converts a balanced signal to an unbalanced signal, and you do a little plug adaptation and jack it into the line level input and add in my case, about 170 milliseconds delay in OBS, and out we go, and it works just fine. So sorry that you're having such difficulty.
I agree with that 100%. Hopefully that took care of your question. Thank you, Eduardo, for it. Let's move on to the next one.
Simon Ray from Shrewsbury, UK. When your voice is your business, how do you keep it in good shape? Do you have a favorite drink to help with this, and would you have this warm or cold?
Mitchell Hill's going to start us off.
Well, answering your last question, never cold. You never want to put cold liquids into your voice box, because it tends to tighten things up, and you want the exact opposite. So tea with honey, warm tea with honey, Earl Grey, that works for me. As far as practicing, just use it. It's like any instrument. You got to use it or lose it. I really like to come on office hours and be a reader 2, maybe sometimes 3 times a week. That tends to keep me pretty good because I'm a voiceover artist also, and I get requests at unpredictable times. So I got to just jump up in the middle of the morning or in the evening or just before bedtime. The voice, I got to depend on it to be good. And then the other thing is the vocal exercises I'll do beforehand, which I will not repeat here because I just look silly.
That's a good thing. Everything Mitch said. And your voice is a set of muscles. I mean, between your diaphragm to push air and all of the things in your face that shape words, your tongue, jaw, and everything else. So very much like an athlete, if you don't regularly run, you cannot be a very high-class runner. And I found the same thing. And in fact, this was something taught to me by my first mentor, a guy named Nat Stevens, who's program director of a radio station that I went in as a young puppy to get my, I'd like to do radio. And he sent me out with a script and a cart and said, go into the production thing and do this. And I did, and I came back to him and he said, you're terrible. And he said, but I hear something, I think you could be better. I'm going to, if you want to get better, I'll give you some help. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, well, go away, read out loud every day for 15 minutes. And then in 2 weeks, if you do that, come back and I'll give you another appointment. He didn't expect me to come back, but I did. And he gave me another cart and I went in and recorded it. And he said, you still are terrible, but you did what I asked. I can hear the difference. And he sent me back again for another 2 weeks. And eventually that started my career. And it started me understanding that if you want to do something, you have to practice at it religiously. It's just like if you were a runner. You can't be a world-class runner without getting up every day and running. And if you want to do voiceover stuff or improve your voice, even for just presentations and things like that, you will not get there unless you do a systematic process for strengthening all the muscles and the muscle in your brain that lets you understand it, unless you do it over and over again, and just do it over and over again, incrementally improve, listen to yourself back, and that's how you get there eventually. Mitchell, you have another thought?
Yeah, there's a ton of techniques, Simon, and everything from speaking your copy into a mirror and watching your face and how it responds. I remember my first really big job in radio at WFIL in Philadelphia, and there was a production there, a guy called Jerry Donahue, who was a class act, knew his business inside and out, and knew how to pry an excellent read out of anybody, even a new green super jock at a major radio station. And I remember vividly him always saying to me, "Mitch, open your mouth when you read." And he would do it like this and almost in my face when I was reading copy, and other little tips and tricks like if you want to smile to be heard, literally smile when you're reading the copy. It comes through. So there's a ton of different tips, and you probably could learn them from a vocal coach or a theatrical group. They'll teach you those subtleties. It always also is good to have a number of dialects stacked away in your head somewhere, because you never know when you're going to be doing a St. Patty's Day spot or doing Halloween and you got to do Bela Lugosi or something. I can do all those. But again, I look silly, and I don't want to look silly on TV.
Yeah, all of those things. Plus, I will say that, the industry changes. It does. When I was starting out, I learned the announcer voice, and I used that for years. And then suddenly the industry changed, and they didn't want announcers anymore. They wanted the confident next door, your buddy from next door who could speak really well, but you imagined when they were talking that it was a guy that you were just chatting about stuff with. They didn't want any of that formality. And then that ebbs and flows, and sometimes a popular person will show up and people want you to sound a little more like them. There's not one thing, but if you get the tool in good shape and you continue to work on it and you pay attention to what's selling, what's working, what people are looking for, there's still a lot of opportunities. I will say there's more content that is done in post now with description or voiceover. So many things on the internet, so many things in voice acting, all of the video games, and there's just a huge world out there. But it does require effort. There are few people who are going to walk up to a microphone for the very first time and do an absolutely brilliant job, because it's a stressful circumstance. Even in these days, I mean, when I started, there was no editing. You had to go in and perform the spot, and it had to be the right length, and you had to get everything right in one take. Yep. That is gone, and now everybody pieces everything together. But you never know what people are going to want. And one thing I will say is, don't dismiss yourself because you don't think you sound like everybody else. That may be exactly the thing that gets you a ton of work. If you don't sound like Mitch or me or anybody else, and you think you have the squeakiest, weirdest voice, it may turn out that that's what they want, something completely different. And I've been in casting sessions since I do a lot of radio work with groups, and we cast a lot. You have no idea what they're looking for. Sometimes they don't have any idea what they're looking for. And it is a natural, organic thing about you and the way you have a voice and the way you deliver things that will resonate with them. And they'll go, that's exactly what we're looking for. We just didn't know until we heard it. So anybody can, but do the work and get ready for it. Lois Richter has a question.
So does that mean my high squeaky voice could be a reader someday on office hours if I worked really, really, really hard at it?
You absolutely could. But not unless you want to do a cartoon voice, do you need to put that much emphasis behind everything?
Oh, all right. I'll just sound like Lois.
Real Lois is what we would be looking for here on Office Hours. And that's, it's not a joke. I've heard the word authenticity more in this last 10 years than I have ever heard before. They just don't want somebody who's putting anything on. They want the real you, whatever that is. And then if you are in the category that they want, they're looking to cast a role of a teenager from Milwaukee. And if you either organically are that, or you have paid enough attention to understand what that sounds like, you can get that gig potentially. So let's move on.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, USA. Was there anything interesting at Infocom? Come on, Guy.
Throwing myself the ball. Come on. Yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff there. One of the things that I saw people lining up to check out was this box, this hologram box. So this company wasn't there, but somebody was using it. So in this example, you see like a person in a conference, you see an audience in a conference room, but this box right here is like they call it the Portal Proto. I'll put a link in the chat, but basically they had this kit. It was a Sony A7S with a white backdrop. And this is kind of what it looks like, but here's the actual show floor. So this company Walkter, I think was the name of it. So you see the guy, he's in front of the white screen, but he walks up and he's like, I just came into the show that morning and he's like, high five, high five. And so I'm virtually high fiving that guy. And he's, 15 feet away from me, but he could be 15,000 miles away from me for intents of purposes, because he's looking at a monitor watching me walk up to it. So he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking at that monitor that he's looking at. So that was one of the more interesting things, to see this technology in person and see that this may be the future, where people come into a virtual event via this box. And I'm sure it's super expensive, but who knows if we'll see some kind of knockoff of this type of box. But this was pre-show, so when the show started, there was a line because they were letting people try it out. So I actually jumped in it at some point in time. Actually, here's another interesting thing, kind of a sneak peek behind the scenes. They were doing presentations on the show floor. And so, I walk up behind the scenes and I'm like, what does he got? So he's got, ATEM, a bunch of converters, Stream Deck, Bird Dog controller, laptop running OBS. And so it's always interesting to see what people are doing productions with. You had some Clearcom comms and some Lay's potato chips, it looks like, and Clearcom headset. Let's see, there's the Bird Dog. Audience with the Bird Dog. Let me see if there's any other good pictures here. Oh yeah, this thing was kind of cool. When I was looking at what Noah was building, I saw this medical cart. This was a 4K wireless transmitter with a battery built into the bottom. So I thought that was pretty cool. But when he told me the price, it was like $9,000 for that. I was like, yeah, I don't know. But it's so smooth though. I could imagine those being in doctors' offices and being pretty cool.
Yeah, you want to show us those potato chips again?
You want to see those one more time? There's Omar from AV Educate. He was there. Oh, this company was pretty cool. They ship remote kits. So they had a couple different ones. Remote Control Studios is the name. You can, if you need 20 kits to ship to 20 different participants, they have ones with teleprompters. So you might want to take a look at those guys. Here's some of the kits with the diced out foam with their bigger kits. So there's the prompter. They had a little light. I'm not sure how they made this little microphone. So they had them ranging from, big kits to little kits. So I think this was their small kit where they had prompter, monitor on top, little light on a little stand, laptop, and then looks like a Rode shotgun. That was pretty cool. Some big old LED walls. This was the data video booth. They had these cool suitcases where if you look at the bottom there, this is the monitor for the teleprompter, and this is the presidential style where it's clear. So that was pretty neat that it folds all the way up into a little case. I was at the data video booth. This was pretty neat. This was US Broadcast booth. They had the PolyChat, which this is that auto tracking. So to see it in person was pretty neat, to walk in front of the camera and see how it lit up and diced you out via these little dots that you see there. So if you walked by the booth, it would automatically start tracking you. So that's Mark Roberts. This is the stuff that Jeff Keithley uses. So Polymotion Chat. And I think at the NAB show segment we did that, we showed that, but they had a pretty nice booth. There was these guys all over the place, rave something, shooting like, I'll have to put a link in chat for this too, but they were shooting with that same mic you have, Bill, that AVX Sennheiser, with an iPhone, and they must have shot every single booth. So there was a team of these guys, like 20 of them, running around shooting every booth. And I went online and looked at it. Some of them only got like 20 views, but it was pretty impressive to see these kids. I say kids, I mean, they're 20-somethings, but most of them were like college kids. Their gig was run around with an iPhone, go hit every single booth. and they did it. More LED walls, because that was something I had an interest in. Crazy characters, you see it, Infocom. That's the new facility. So this is the new West Hall. This screen was amazing. This is one gigantic screen. I mean, you could see for perspective the size of that person. It's pretty grand for those of you who have been going to the Las Vegas Convention Center for a while. The facility's beautiful. And down here's when you first walk in is where you eat. So there's a bunch of vendors there. New Shure 920 ceiling mic. They have it in round, and I think that's a 2x2 square for regular classroom. So I'm excited to hear this. I didn't have time to actually listen to it, but it was neat to see. And they're probably out of stock anyway, because those things are super hard. I think we heard September. Some of their little booths. I think that was a Logitech. So this may be the future too, is, seeing these kind of huddle type rooms where a single person can go into an office in an open office workspace to have their own private Zoom call. That was the Logitech booth. More of that bird dog stuff. Office stuff. That was our booth, the Studiomatic stuff. Oh, I went inside of that thing. So here was me.
Looked like an action figure for a minute, guy.
What do I do? Yeah, so it was weird to see myself, it was fun. So I don't know how much those things cost, but I think that they're the future as well. Yeah, there's my little disco dance. He was saying to dance. So there you go. I think that's Infocom pretty summed up.
Cool.
Little light that I saw at one of the booths. I think that was the Logitech booth, little tiny light that they had up there. But yeah, that's stuff from Infocom.
Thank you. That was really a cool little visit. I had never been to Infocom, so at least I know a little bit about what it's all about now. And that is such a fast moving, that part of your industry and what you do is just amazing at how much innovation there is coming out of there. Let's move on to the next question.
That's from Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland. Is there a sub $1,000 DSLR and lens narrow angle with autofocus that would give me panel grade video?
Mitchell Hill's going to take a shot at this.
I love the fact that they use the term panel grade video, because that's what we are. But my personal choice, and most of the people on the panel are going to go, here he comes. He's going to pull out his Sony ZV-E10. And here it is. This is about an $800 camera. I've tricked it out a little bit with a small rig cage for it, and a telephoto lens that I just purchased. That is, for me, the autofocus on a Sony, excellent. You can't top it. There's no point in having a remote focus when you have an autofocus like the Sony has. It's great.
Nice. All right. Without objection, we will move on to the next question.
And it's from Morgan Price, Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I just got an Amaran F21X as a desk key light and appreciate its fanless silent design and a grid. What other fanless lights do you recommend for a fill light aperture for Sidus link, as I think the flexible F21X you pay for the flexible panel?
Yeah, I've never used those flexible panel lights, but I know there's a lot of research into that form factor, something that you can wrap around things, and that I'm sure would be easier to carry than these big ones that we do. I will say that the desk key lights are a thing that's coming along, and there used to be really hard to get them. And what I mean by that is that the LEDs, people used to look for how much light can I get out of these panels. And in a desk situation, you want exactly the opposite. You want to have something that is putting out not so much light, and particularly that you can dim that light appropriately without color shifts, because you're in a very close environment. I mean, most of us are a foot or two away from our lights at most. And if you have something that's putting out a lot of lumens, it can wash you out or make your face so bright that you have to iris down. And when you iris down, your background becomes darker, and you can't control things like the color of your background, because these lights that were designed to fill a big space, which is what they tended to do in the early days of this LED lighting, just weren't appropriate for the uses we're putting in. You're getting more and more lights that do this in the inexpensive realm. And also, Amaran tends to be a little more costly and a little better and a little more professionally built. They're not into that under $50 or even under $100 price point that some of the less expensive offshore lights, but it's just, there's a lot of stuff going on. Mitch, you have some notes on this too, so dive in.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a fanless light. I mean, here I am with my light panel. There it is. Always point the camera in the wrong direction. It's a soft light. It's a 1x1. It has a fan in it, but I have frankly never, ever heard it run. So that's a vote for that. Is it flexible? No, it's not flexible, but it gives you a nice wrap because of the soft panel that it has.
Yeah, I just think there so many more people are using lighting because so many people are on camera in these kind of Zoom situations and other things that are similar, that there's a lot of innovation in the low end of the lighting thing. And cameras are also much better these days than they were at managing to balance the different color temperatures of lights. Unless there's something infecting. I mean, in the early days of LEDs, we used to think of a very heavy green cast because they had limitations in what the spectrum was they could produce. But they've mostly solved those problems. And now LEDs can be have a color rendering index, a CRI, that is up high enough to be able to allow you to do whatever you need to do with them. Lois has a thought here, too.
Lois has a question here, too.
Go for it.
Looking at my face here, I've got LED lights pointed at the ceiling. This is my normal house lighting. I would rather look a little less blue. So is it better to add an orange light or to turn off that light and replace it with a less light? So there'll be less light altogether, but it might be a better color. So as far as getting a good quality panel image, what should I do?
Well, I'm noticing behind you there is a window, and that window has light coming through it. Blue light is often sunlight. Sunlight tends to be high in the color spectrum, up around as much as 10,000 degrees Kelvin. And even when it's lower than that on a cloudy day or something like that, it still is in the blue range of the spectrum. So for me, when I'm doing any kind of lighting plot, the first thing I look at is what's there, and can I get rid of it if I need to? I have a window that directly behind me, and I'm going to point to it right there. That actually set of blinds is an exterior window. And there was no way I could get the exposure that I wanted in my camera with that allowing light in. So I went to an art store and I bought some of the thicker foam core. It's about a ½ an inch thick in black. And I cut out a line of it and put it, the exact same window size, put it in there, and bingo, the exterior light that I was fighting in my early days in this space went away. So the first thing is to get light that might be infecting the color out if you can, and then add light that either can be controlled in terms of color value or is all the same color value. And so your camera can balance to that. If you have tungsten coming from one side and daylight coming from the other side, you're going to have a significant problem keeping the color balance on both sides of your face consistent, because they're just in two different, tungsten tends to be about 3,200 degrees Kelvin. As I said, daylight somewhere up in the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, up as far as 10,000 degrees Kelvin. They just are different colored lights. So all the gel manufacturers, Lee and who's the other big one? Roscoe, make plenty of kinds of gels that are designed to fix these exact problems. So the other way is, if you like the light, you can get what's called CTO, color temperature orange, which takes and filters out much of the blue from that daylight's coming through the window. They even make it so that you can get CTO, color temperature orange, with neutral density. So if you can cut a piece of that out and put it in the window, suddenly the window looks to the camera exactly like your tungsten light source, and everything is balanced and you're fine. So really it comes down to deciding, what lights do you have? What are you going to use? How do you get rid of things that aren't like them so that everything is consistent? And then your camera has an easier job of making everything look right. So that's the traditional process of deciding. If you look too blue on one side, that's probably what's happening. Let's go on to the next question.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. Aside from office hours, where are you finding the tech solutions to the challenges you face today?
Kenneth Jones is going to start us off here.
Chad, other sources? Other than office hours? I'm puzzled. Chad. I'm bewildered. I'm flummoxed. I'm gobsmacked. I don't understand the question.
So let's go to John Pretto. Maybe he can help.
Hold on, I'm looking up flummoxed. I don't know that word, flummoxed. Chad knows the answer to this one. What's going on today with these questions? All of man's accumulated knowledge is on YouTube.
There you go. Now the question is, can you find the right piece of it among the 62 billion explainer videos that people have put up over the last 10 years there? Lois Richter has the next question. Let's move on.
And Lois asks, outside Zoom, what is on your wish list?
Ooh, global peace. Let's go ahead with John Pretto.
You know, it's funny because I go with my friends to these car shows of old hot rods and muscle cars. And if I could short the muscle car industry, I'd be shorting the muscle car industry because the bottom's going to drop out. I want to go to a trust fund show where you walk around and see all the interest rates that trust funds. I want a trust fund, Lois.
Ooh, do you want to get into the personal bank syndrome here? That's hard. The hard club to break into. Mitchell Hill, you're up.
I want Thursday to come sooner so I can see the next Star Trek episode. Right, John?
Simple man with simple desires. There we go. I like that. Lois.
I want to have my studio finished so I can actually use it.
Everybody resonates with that. When you're in construction, and particularly if it lasts a long time, it's, it's that weird combination of annoyance and hope. You know it's going to be good when you finally get it done, but while you're in the construction phase, hard to deal with. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael, I had a brainstorm last night of leveraging the office hours concept and Mukana platform to build a community of support for new parents and families. If you de-emphasize the specific subject, could you see what we have pioneered having a social impact?
Interesting question, Douglas, and I don't think anybody else wants to weigh in. So I'll say a couple of things. Often people come up with ideas, and in the idea stage, they're really good. When you dig down into the pragmatic, sometimes they are easy to do and sometimes they are not. The one thing I would suggest is anytime I hear the word support group, I think you're in the realm gently of mental health and things like that. And I would think it might, and it might not, be an issue of getting people to go on any kind of a broadcast medium and talk about their problems. I know in my corporate practice, the single biggest challenge I've ever faced is building trust with each one of my clients such that they will tell me what is not right about their business. Because basically that's where I come in. Unless they have a problem that they think video could help them solve, they have no reason to pay me any money to help them create that solution. In saying that, in any kind of a help people therapeutic circumstance, particularly you note family, so that means there may be kids involved, the issues with privacy, the issues with how do you do this in a more public forum and still maintain that kind of privacy and get people to feel comfortable about releasing things that may be uncomfortable in their life. Is it possible? Yeah, we've seen talk shows on television where people all talk about all the crazy things that are happening in their life and they feel fine with it. So I might be totally wrong about this, but I do know in circumstances that I've seen where people have been struggling, it's hard to get them to feel comfortable talking about that in real life. I don't know whether that'll impact it or not. Let's have Lois's thoughts because.
So if you look at what has happened here on education time on Saturday, that I think is a small example of what could happen. I would think that the office hours Mukana platform, that whole thing, is very good for specific detailed questions. And it's very good if you have a population who is interested in that, is self-selected, knows about it and everything. I think that if you try for something a little more general, it isn't going to be as interactive and the Mukana part might not be as useful. And it's going to take a long time to get off the ground. A long time for people to find that this exists, unless you already have a pre-existing community that is just going to use this as a new tool.
Interesting things. Let's move on. I just realized that we've got the top of the hour coming up here in 7 minutes, and we've got about 7 questions ahead of us. So let's burn through them as quickly as we can. Go ahead, Mitch.
Douglas Carmichael asked, would you recommend any specific training materials on mixing music in Dolby Atmos or other immersive formats? Where should I start?
This is really a question I think Alex would be very important to have weigh in on this. So if you don't mind, Douglas, coming back, keep your question, keep it in your mind, or write it down or have it pushed back or whatever. And let's have you come when Alex is here, because he'll give you much better. He's just knows so much about Atmos, and I don't think a lot of us have that much experience. Let's move on to the next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. Anyone had taken a valid attempt at streaming on Instagram Live without breaking Meta's policies?
Anybody in the panel have any experience with that? It looks like we're gonna whiff on that one too. Sorry about that. Again, you are most welcome to save your question, bring it back when we have a different panel here. Every day we have different experts who have different areas that they know about. So let's move on to the next one.
Lois Richter in Davis, California. If needing to have 2 Zoom panelists in the same house, how far away would they need to be without a door in between? I use ears and a mic. She will use a mic, but computer speakers.
And John Preto wants to make a note on this.
Well, having the computer speakers open is a problem. When Fenwick and the boys come, we're in the same room, but we use the PR40, which has great off-axis rejection in it. And we're 10 feet apart, but for open speakers, yeah, they'd have to be, I wouldn't do that. I'd give them headphones.
Yeah, distance, I would think, is everything in this. And the inverse square principle tells us that if you can get 2 microphones that are 10 feet apart, the level of perception on one mic diaphragm is going to be 100 times. It's the inverse square, 100 times less than the first. That's plenty to give you separation so that the mics aren't going to be bleeding into each other. If you were 5 feet away, that's 25 times. I think you might be getting into trouble with picking up the second voice being just 25 times less than the main one. So distance is your friend in those kind of circumstances. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. It's hotter than blazes in the Midwest. What do you do about equipment in a vehicle in the heat? In the back of my mind, I've always concerned about batteries and lenses.
Mitchell's going to start us out. Mitchell?
Most people are thinking about their iPhones. Keep it off the dashboard and out of direct sunlight, and you'll be okay.
I spent a lot of my career in Phoenix, and it was constantly something, and I just had to pay attention to understanding. You're right. Things like batteries do not like extreme cold. They do not like extreme heat. I have come back to my car to see batteries that have actually exploded because they've gotten over temperature and things like that. They didn't light on fire or anything crazy like that, but you can just see the internal media has expanded so much that the battery is no longer any good. So heat is an issue. Make sure it's inside. The kind of reflective windshield covers can be useful in keeping indoor heat down. In transit, you don't want to leave things outside, even on load in and load out. I've actually added an extra body to some of my things if I needed to get all the equipment from an air-conditioned vehicle inside so that it doesn't spend any time in the heat. I think you're just wise to think about it. And remember that inside a closed car, if you're leaving something gear behind that's heat sensitive, it's the same thing that just constant caution about in the Southwest about don't leave kids or pets in cars, because literally it can get up into the high 120, 130, 150 even direct sunlight into a car that's closed and doesn't have any ventilation. Big deal. So let's move on to the next question.
Next question from Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California. Sorry, but I need a little more info. Guy, can you go over your video audio chain again? Do you run the ATEM and audio and everything through vMix and use the delay in vMix?
And Guy, try to keep it about a minute or two.
Yeah, it's just a camera goes into the ATEM into vMix, then sound devices mix pre, USB into vMix. On the audio source, you double-click the audio source and hit delay and go to 100 or whatever your delay needs to be by using PhotoJoseph stuff. But yeah, that's it. vMix ties it all together, and then I output to the Zoom.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. At the Super Bowl 56 halftime show, they had 192 audio connections between the Pro Tools playback system and the broadcast front of house consoles. What could they be using all those connections for, considering the minimal instrumentation on stage?
It brings to my mind the old quote, work expands to fill the time you allow for it, no matter what it is. And I think comms channels and things like that, audio connections, you start with 192 and you think you'll never get to that. And then the next thing you know, you have. So it's just part of the parcel. Let's do the next question and then we can get on time here.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri. I've been told that the Elgato brand is good for streaming. Does anyone know how good their products are, or does going up to cheap professional gear going to be better for Zooms and streams?
I don't have any personal experience with the Elgato brand. I know that their lights have been talked about for a little bit of time. Mitch may have some direct. Mitch?
Everything I've used from them, from lights to Streambox or Stream Deck, I've all been first-class quality. The price is surprisingly low, but the quality is surprisingly good. So there you go.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, we are at 8:58, 8:59, so I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and roll credits and see if we can get out on the credit at the top of the hour. Thank you all for participating today. We appreciate your being here as part of Office Hours, and we'll see you the next time.
Is this the whispering time?
No.
This is the official whispering time.
Well, once
We don't
again,
have time for
age and
whispering.
treachery beats out youth and enthusiasm. So
I seriously didn't know if we were going to get
of
enough
course,
content.
of course,
Fill 2 hours. Thank you all.
it
so
always
very
happens.
And that's a wrap.
Thanks,
Ain't
Lois.
that special? Wow.